like Silas tearing down the prison walls. Wanna face that fire, won't let me go. God's got my back, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. I wanna walk like Moses, right through the waves. One day I'll see that promised land, no longer slaves. Well, the fear is talking, no, it can't take out my faith. I'm gonna praise, I'm gonna praise. I praise the mountain moving, body raising, breaker of chains. Gonna praise, I'm gonna praise. I praise the heaven seated, undefeated, highest of names. That's who I praise. Hey, that's who I praise. That's who I praise. Wanna gift like Mary, wanna break my face. Wanna sleep like Daniel, leave it in a lion's cage. Gonna get that promise, just like Jericho. Yeah, I know what'll make it fall. I'm gonna praise, I'm gonna praise. I praise the mountain moving, body raising, breaker of chains. Gonna praise, I'm gonna praise. I praise the heaven seated, undefeated, highest of names. That's who I praise. Hey, I praise the God who's proven He can do impossible things. That's who I praise. Hey, that's who I praise. That's who I praise. He is the Lion of Judah. He is the Lamb that was slain. The only one who's worthy, worthy, worthy of all of His names. That's who I praise. He is the risen Messiah. He is the Ancient of Days. The only one who's worthy, worthy, worthy of all of His names. That's who I praise. I'm gonna praise. I praise the mountain moving, body raising, breaker of chains. Gonna praise. I'm gonna praise. I praise the heaven seated, undefeated, highest of names. That's who I praise. Hey, I praise the God who's proven He can do impossible things. That's who I praise. Hey, that's who I praise. That's who I praise. That's who I praise. That's who I praise. I wanna love like Jesus, that kind of grace. Wanna live like I got no more precious time to waste. Gonna give Him glory with all my thanks, 'cause there's no greater, stronger, higher name than that's who I praise.
Hey, good morning, Capital City Church. It's Pastor Rick, and I'm really happy that you've chosen to be here this morning or that you've chosen to join us online. We are enjoying a beautiful day here in Iowa. It's Friday right now. It's Sunday, of course, when you are listening to this, but it's about 70 degrees. There's a couple clouds in the sky, but man, it doesn't get much better than this. We don't want word to get out that the weather can be this beautiful here, or everybody else is going to come and try to live here too. We're getting kind of crowded, so let's keep it to ourselves. I have a few announcements that I want to share with you. The first one is that we have a summer kickoff lunch, June the 1st, which is literally right around the corner next Sunday. It will happen immediately following the second service. You are invited. Everyone is invited to come and to share a lunch with us on Sunday. And what I would like for you to know is that you will have, we're requesting or asking you to bring something according to the first letter of your last name. You'll see a graphic here, I think that will help you figure out what it is that we'd like for you to bring. And we want to make sure that you and your family, that your friends come and celebrate the summer kickoff with us. The second thing is that last Sunday, I mentioned to you men that if you'd like to get together and talk about the life of David and Benaiah, that we would do that. Back in January when we met and we had a few sessions together on Wednesday evening, I told you that we would be back together again after Easter. Well, it's after Easter, and I heard from a lot of you this last week. So did our staff, our pastors, that you men are ready to get together again. And so we're just going to do 2 weeks this time, June 11th on Wednesday evening, beginning at 6:30 p.m., and June the 18th on Wednesday evening, beginning at 6:30 p.m. It will be in the cafe. We're going to be discussing the life of David, kind of how it relates to Benaiah, some leadership principles, some parenting, some being a good man, being a good husband. You don't want to miss it. So I want to remind you, show up at 6:30 p.m. on June the 11th. Father's Day is right in the middle of that, so we don't want to miss that. Which leads me to my next and final announcement that Father's Day, June the 15th, there will be free drinks in the cafe for all dads. But what I'd like for you to know particularly is we have a baptism service scheduled. A really great service. Second service, we'll be having a father baptizing a couple of his children, some other baptisms. But if you're interested, if you've been waiting to respond to what you know you need to do to be baptized in believer's baptism by immersion, as a profession of your salvation, I would encourage you to reach out to Kathy at capcitymail.com and to let us know that you are ready to take that step. One of our pastors, most likely Pastor Jared, will follow up with you and ask you for a little more information, get all the details for you, and get you squared away. Now, today we're going to be continuing our series on Who Is That and Who Cares? And it's been fun so far. Today I have a story for you that it's a story. It's a wild ride. If you have never heard of this story before, you're going to have a hard time believing that it's actually in the Bible. It's found in the book of Hosea. Hosea is one of the minor prophets. He was a prophet of God. He was given a message by God. I'll tell you a little more about Hosea in a minute. But there's a section of scripture at the very end of the Old Testament. It's the last 12 books that are called the minor prophets. Now, it's not minor prophet because they're less important. It's not like baseball where you have the minor leagues and the major leagues or hockey or anything else. Minor prophets are called minor prophets because the message that they were given was a little bit more succinct, and they generally don't take up quite as much real estate. Now, Hosea, he was a prophet and really was practicing. He was ministering for 60 to 70 years, which makes him one of the longest serving prophets that we read about. But there's a story in Hosea that we're going to pick up about a lady named Gomer. Maybe you've never heard of a lady called Gomer. When I grew up, there was a show on TV called Gomer Pyle. And he would, what I remember about Jim Nabors was he would say, "Go, Lee, go, Lee, go, Lee." And maybe that's not quite exactly how you remember it. But he was in the military and he liked to sing, and his name was Gomer. Well, this lady wasn't in the military. I don't have any idea if she likes to sing. And she wasn't on a TV show from when we were children. In fact, if she was on a TV show, it would not have been appropriate for when we were children. In just a minute, Ashley and the worship team are going to come and lead you in a song that is going to tip the hand, going to give away what we're going to be talking about related to the life of Gomer, a lady named Gomer, a man named Hosea. And I want you to listen to this song and see if you can figure out where we're heading.
Your cheating heart will make you weak. You'll cry and cry and try to sleep, but sleep won't come the whole night through. Your cheating heart will tell on you when tears come down like falling rain. You'll toss around, go my name, walk the floor the way I do. Your cheating heart will tell on you.
All right, we're continuing our series on Who Is That and Who Cares? And today, as you've already seen, we're going to be talking about a lady named Gomer. And if you've never heard this story, buckle up. It's a good one. It's one that's easy to skip when you read the Old Testament. It is hard to teach and fun to listen to. But before we get there, or until we get there, I just want to kind of remind you that we started last week with a quote from A.W. Tozer that's a good question for us to begin this week and perhaps to begin the next few weeks as we keep working through this series. This question that I want you to consider, it may change your answer each week. I was talking to a lady in between services who said, man, last week my answer to this question was different than after the message this week. And I said, that's fantastic. It probably will be different even next week after we go through the story we're going to cover in the week after, because we're building a composite, a picture of who God is and what God looks like. A.W. Tozer says, the most important thing about you is what comes to mind when you think about God. What is it you think about God? And when you answer this question, and if you answer this question completely and honestly, then it's very easy to predict your spiritual future. What is it you think about God? Today, Hosea is definitely going to contribute to what it is that you think about God. Hosea will probably cause you to ask some questions and look for some answers, and hopefully we can apply this passage today to our lives in a way that makes a difference. As we study the Old Testament, I want to remind you that some things apply. We apply principles. We apply truths about who God is and his nature and his character and how he relates to people. Some things are specific to the Old Testament, the time, the place, the context. The nation of Israel, for example. Hosea is a prophet who was serving the northern kingdom of a divided kingdom of Israel, and he was serving very faithfully. He served in over about 25 years, was preaching on a theme, and the theme was really important. The theme was that God loves you, that we disobey, that he'll take you back. And he preached on it for about 25 years, and about 2/3 of the way through this 25-year period of preaching, God asked him to do something to illustrate the point that was mind-boggling. It doesn't seem very churchy. It doesn't seem very Christian. Now, in the Old Testament, there are many people who God uses as examples, or let me say that better. He asks people to do something that will make their life an example so that people can see who Jesus is going to be and what Jesus will look like in a life. And so Old Testament characters, many of them, were asked to do certain things that you and I would likely never be asked to do because we're living on the other side of Jesus and our lives are living examples of who Jesus is and the grace that comes through that relationship. So the Old Testament characters are looking forward. Does it make sense? To Jesus. We are looking back to Jesus, the event, the person who changed everything. And so as we look at this story today, I want you to realize or remember that Hosea is a life, and God asked this person to do something that turned him into an illustration of a 25-year preaching series that he was giving to a nation who desperately needed to hear it, but the application is as personal as it could ever get. The minor prophet, Hosea, who spoke and wrote prophecies about Jesus, lived 700 years before Jesus was born, give or take. Powerful message, surprising theme, startling story. Are you ready to get into it? Okay, good. How many of you have heard of Gomer and Hosea and the story before my announcement video? Just slip a hand up. If you haven't, it's not unusual, not uncommon. So if you haven't, let me just see. Raise your hands if this is new. Most of us in here, this would be new. And it's for a lot of folks who've been in church their whole life, this is a new story. So don't worry about that at all. That's the reason we're doing this series, is to bring some of these old characters, these Old Testament characters to life. We're going to dive in right now to Hosea chapter 1. We're going to read, and man, it's going to be a lot of fun. Here we go. The word of the Lord that came to Hosea, son of Beeri, during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and during the reign of Jeroboam, son of Joash, king of Israel. When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him. Now that's all very exciting, isn't it? Hosea is getting a word from the Lord. A prophet is a person chosen by God for a specific time and a specific place to give a specific message to people. God is speaking. And so Hosea is waiting. And the Bible says God is revealing. He's getting ready to give Hosea a word. He's getting ready to lay some truth on him. And so I'm sure Hosea, pen in hand, ready to hear what God had to say. Now, you may not know much about Hosea, so now would be a good time to stop and just remind you that Hosea, even though he'd been a preacher for a long time, was a single guy. That he built a life. He built a ministry. He had been to seminary. He had been serving faithfully in this northern kingdom for years and years, preaching, and probably wanted a wife, was probably looking for a family, but like most men back in that day, might have felt a little incomplete socially because the structure of their society required marriage and children much more than we do today. And so one of the things that would no doubt have been a prayer request in his heart, something he was looking for, would have been a soulmate, a person to share his life with. Upstanding man, well-respected preacher, morally, he was walking with God, and the word of the Lord finally comes to him. And this is what God said: "Go marry a promiscuous woman and have children with her." Did you expect to see that coming? No. The translation in the King James, if you grew up with a King James Bible, it's kind of hilarious. It says, "Go marry a woman of whoredom," or something along those lines. And I'm thinking, oh, that sounds dark, doesn't it? A woman of whoredom or whoredom. I don't know. But I mean, prostitute is the general consensus of the translation. And so Hosea's like, say what? I was thinking maybe it'd be somebody from the church, maybe a volunteer from the kids ministry or the youth group, maybe somebody serving on City Serve, maybe one of these ladies who I've known for a while. I mean, there's this really cute girl that works you'd be like, you're going to have to run that by me again, God. I don't think I heard you correctly. You want me to do what? And God said very clearly to him, I want you to go and I want you to marry a prostitute. Now, there were several types of prostitutes back in the day, and theologians they're not conclusive as to what her job actually was. But suffice to say, she was morally, she had some challenges. Now, some women, back in this day, I would say most women who found themselves in prostitution because they had to, not because they wanted to. It happened to them because of life. Sometimes it was a husband putting a wife away. She didn't have family, and so she had no other choice. Sometimes it was the death of somebody who was supposed to take care of her. Sometimes she would fall out with Jewish society and not have a way to provide for herself. Women couldn't get jobs like men can or could back then. It was a different society. I'm very thankful that it's different. But before you have a lot of compassion on Gomer, thinking maybe she was a woman who was trapped in a life that she didn't want, reserve judgment, because this is a life she chose, and as you'll find as we develop this story, it was a life that she liked. She was where she wanted to be, doing what she wanted to do. It was a choice. She wasn't, at least obviously, a victim. She was a willing participant. And so Hosea received his instructions. Head downtown, find the red light district, wherever that is. Pick out a prostitute, take her home, have children. Bizarre. Now remember, I said these are things that God will likely never ask you to do, okay? I'm not suggesting that. This is not even really a passage or a message about marriage in our society, except some people are looking very aggressively for ways to leave and use this passage as a sort of a litmus, and it's just not. It's about a relationship between God and his people, okay? But Hosea was charged with something that was hard to do. You ever been charged with something hard? My wife and I found something hard this last week. We have 2 dogs, one Daisy, 55-pound standard poodle, and we have one little mutt named Baxter who's about 12 or 13 pounds, and we don't know who Baxter's dad is. His mom was a Yorkie, we know that, but he's like a wiener dog looking, he's a strange looking dog, a good little dog. He got sick, and when he got sick, he got the stomach sick. And when dogs get stomach sick, then nobody's happy because they get sick wherever they are and on whatever they are. And, if they could make an alarm sound, in the morning that sounded like a dog getting ready to throw up, hacking, it would get me out of bed. Baxter was sick out of both ends. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, both ends. Okay, have I explained it enough? All right. We knew we were probably going to have to take him to the vet, but we were waiting to see if he would get better on his own because I didn't want to spend we go to a vet, every time you walk in, it's $300, and that's if they don't do anything. If they do anything, it's $600. I mean, it's insane. And we knew we were probably going to have to take him, but we wanted to wait just to make sure he didn't just, work it out. And on the morning that we had to take him to the vet, or the afternoon, we had him in the mudroom kind of locked up. And, he had been sick and he had been messing on himself and needed to be cleaned up before we took him to the vet. So I said to Joy, hey, Joy, you've had 2 boys. You've changed thousands of diapers over the course of your life. This should be your job. And so Joy, she's good-natured, and she just rolled her eyes at me, and she picked up the dog and lifted up his tail, and she started gagging. She was like, oh, yeah! I mean, she literally, I'm not making this up. And she said, I can't do it. Now, she probably was faking me out. She probably, because she's scary smart. But I mean, she's got the dog and I can't do it. The smell's killing me. And so I grabbed Baxter. Now, I'm a germaphobe, but I step in because man's got to do what a man's got to do, right? We take care of our dogs and our wives. And I grabbed the dog and I cleaned him up. I cleaned him spotless. And it was terrifying. It was disgusting. It was a hard thing to do. I washed my hands 7 times with antibacterial soap, and I still didn't feel like I was clean. But sometimes we're called to do hard things, but that kind of a hard thing is not nearly the hard thing that Hosea was called to do. Think about the judgment he would have received from the good church people, from the people he went to school with, from his childhood friends, from all of the folks in his community. And God says, I want you to go, and I want you to get married, which was a good thing, but I want you to pick one of the worst. And again, I don't mean that she's invaluable and that her soul's not important, but the lifestyle choices she's made and what she did for both profession and for sport was a dangerous thing to the fabric of marriage and to walking with God. I want you to go pick her. I want you to go pick one. I want you to marry her, and I want you to have kids. Boom, mind-blowing. So he did. And God says, when I want you to pick her, I want you to pick her because this land we're living in is unfaithful to the Lord and like an adulterous wife. So he married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. And then she conceived and bore him a daughter, and then she conceived and bore him a son, so they had 3 kids. Now God sent messages through the names of the kids. You have kids, I stressed out over the names of my kids, naming my kids. I stressed out hard. Anybody, can you relate? Did you stress out about when you had to name your kids, you didn't know what to name them? Anybody else but me? A couple. I mean, it's hard, right? They're going to live with their name their whole life. You don't just, pick one just without thinking it through. And my oldest son, Richard, you can tell we got his name from me, is Richard R. Melick IV. And my grandfather was Richard R. Melick Sr. My dad's Richard R. Melick Jr. I'm Richard R. Melick III. Richard R. Melick IV sounded so pretentious, like an English king or something, And so we thought maybe we'll stop the cycle with Richard. After he was born, he looked so much like me that Joy and I were like, he must be called Richard R. Melick IV. Now, he has a son on the way. And I'm like, hey, you going with the 5th, buddy? And he's dealing with the same stuff. He's like, well, Senior's no longer with us, so maybe they could go back and we don't know what his name's going to be called. Emery's decided that my little grandson, who's now he's going to be born in August, but my 3-year-old granddaughter has decided that his name is Jackson Grouper. And that's what she's been calling him. She's not stressing out at all. I stressed out. When Nathan was born, we didn't know what to call him. And he was so big, he was so fat, he was almost 11 pounds. When he was in the little nursery, little bassinet, it looked like he worked there and was taking a break. I mean, he was so big. And we didn't name him, and the lady with the birth certificates coming in on the cart, and they had started calling him Bubba, and the nurses. And we knew that was going on the birth certificate if we didn't come up with something. And we liked Nathan, but we felt under pressure. But can you imagine naming your kids and God telling you what to name them? And these children were named messages for the people. And the son was named Gonna Scatter. It literally means going to sow. That God is going to scatter the people and that they're going to be dispersed because they were enjoying a time when they were fat and happy. They were complacent. They were rich. They had fallen away from their first love, and they needed a reality check. And so the first son's name was Gonna Scatter. The daughter came along, and God named her No Mercy. Now, can you imagine, sweet little girls, sweet little daughters. It's like, well, here's my son. His name's Gonna Scatter, and this is my little daughter. And what's your name, sweetheart? No Mercy.